So, good morning and welcome to Parent Sanctuary and Let's Build Our Village Facebook group. We are running sessions on how to be a grown-up or adulting, because when you have children, you realise that pretty soon you're going to be head of the family and you might have some grown-up jobs to be doing. And things like wills, lasting power of attorney, mortgages, dealing with insurances, finances, and sadly death as well. You might be the head of the family that is organising the funeral for someone, or caring for an older relative or your partner during their last days. Now, this isn't to say this is going to happen today. It's not to say it's going to happen next month, but having an understanding of what happens as someone is dying or has died means that when we're faced with that situation, we can have less fear, and we can be more aware of the things that are out there that are available to us, instead of being full of grief and trying to navigate the internet or trusting what other people are telling you, when you could be pushed towards buying things that you don't need. You could be pushed towards having services that aren't right for that person, or you could find out after the event that you've missed out on having something as essential as an end-of-life doula. And I say that because I had the same sort of scenario with my firstborn, in that I didn't even know that birth doulas existed. And now it's one of the things that I recommend to people all the time, that if they're going to have a baby, having a birth doula with them can be so helpful for so many reasons. So when Nancy said that she was a end-of-life doula, I just went, I need to speak to you. I need to know how this works for the end of life, because as a registered nurse and as a healthcare assistant in the hospital, I spent a lot of time caring for the dying, and I found it quite a privilege to be a part of that journey. I found it was something that wasn't scary. It was something that I felt was doing someone a service that was so beautiful and so essential, to be with that person and to make sure that they weren't in pain, to make sure that they felt cared for. It really did feel like a privilege to be part of that passage through to death. So I'm not even sure I can find the correct words for how it felt, but to hold someone's hand if their family member isn't there, to strut their hair away from their face, to make sure that they look like themselves, not like someone in a hospital. It was really important for me to be completely there with them and give them time and space to be human together. So Nancy, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, you just described that really well, because ultimately, you know, it's those small touches, you know, like you say, just the moving of the hair, or just putting their hair how they want it, you know, helping them to wear something that they would normally wear and not spend the day in their pajamas, or, you know, it's those small touches that make such a big difference, really. Yeah. So, you know, as you've said, my role is very similar to a birth doula, in the fact, you know, birth doula supports women through pregnancy, childbirth, and those first few weeks with their new baby, weeks or months even. Whereas my role is to support people from the time of diagnosis through the dying process, and their families as well. That's a really important part of it. And the first few weeks with the family after that person has died as well. And you know, part of my role as well is death education, you know. So I might also be supporting people who haven't been diagnosed with anything, but they want to prepare, they want to talk about death and dying, they want to make an end of life care plan or advanced care plan or an advanced decision, and I can help people to get that in place, or just to help families talk about it together, to bring it out, because death is still a subject that people just don't want to talk about, even though it's all going to happen to us. So
yeah, that's one of the things that came up with the Full Life Circle funeral planners, that, you know, it's we're born, and the very fact that we're born means that we are going to die. And as a society, we generally want to have a ceremony around the good things in life, births, marriages, birthdays. We tend to celebrate those things, and we do have a ceremony around death, but we don't seem to put as much thought and preparation into that, the wants and the wishes for our dying, as we do for having our 60th birthdays parties, or we do for our weddings. And yet it's the same level of ceremony, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a real shame, because, you know, we've got one shot at this. You know, that's it. You get one shot at caring for that particular loved one at the end of life, and you want to get it right. And when people reach that, you know, not just the person dying, but the families as well, reach that crisis point, it can be very difficult for them to consider all their options, or know what their options are, or even just to sit down and just breathe for a bit, you know, take some deep breaths and think about how they can continue to live fully in that process of dying. Because this is what we forget. We forget that, you know, even though we might be, you know, diagnosed, or, you know, this person might be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they might be approaching that end stage of life, they are still living. And we have to treat people as if they, you know, they are still living, they're still human, they still need tender touch, they still need to be spoken to and not over. There are so many things, and, you know, so my place in it all really is, you know, I come into a family as a non-medical person and ask them, okay, what do you need? How can I help you through this period in your life? You know, it may be that they just need me to walk the dog, to wash up. It may need me to sit with the person that's dying, to give their loved one a break. It may just need me to help prepare the family with documents, you know, the advanced decisions, as I've mentioned, and the end of life care plans, you know, the advanced care plans. So it may need people, you know, discussing these things with me, because if we don't talk about them, then we end up making decisions on behalf of somebody that you have no idea that whether they would have chosen that. So I suppose in a similar way to Lucy spoke last week about the funeral, if you don't discuss it while you're still alive, you don't know whether that person, you know, wants a cremation or a burial. And it's the same. Do in your care, would you prefer to be at home, in a hospice, in a care home, in a hospital? Where would you like to see yourself at the end of life? Where do you want to spend your last months, weeks, days, hours? You know, it's really important that we give people the death, as good a death as what we can wish for them. Yes, so that could mean being at home in a hospital. And if they want to be at home, how can we support you with that? Who do we need to bring in? You know, because I don't replace the other services. I don't replace hospice or Marie Curie or Macmillan. I work alongside them. So, you know, how can, I suppose in some ways I'm like a coordinator. So, so helping, you know, to make sure everything runs smoothly. But yeah, it's talking about it. Let's get talking about it while we're still well and in that place where we can think clearly without being in that crisis point, without the panic behind, okay, what do I want? Oh my goodness, you know, I don't know. Would I, you know, do I want this? Yeah. Talk about it while we're still well.
So many people don't realise that home is an option for them.
They don't.
And it's home is one of the most beautiful places to spend your last days, because when the doctor says you've got days to live, that might be 100 days or it might be 2. The doctor doesn't know. So where do you,
that's right,
the time that you know is limited, do you want to spend it in a sterile environment without your own belongings around you, or do you want to spend that time in your own bedroom with your family and friends coming and sitting with you? Like, to me, when people realize that home is an option and that there are so many services out there to make even the smallest of bedrooms somewhere that they can be and safely looked after by the care staff, by the nurses. Once they realize that there are hospital beds available, there are commodes that are available, we can make very minor adaptations to people's homes so that they're a safe working environment for other people. And it's like this weight comes off them when they're not sent away to die.
That's right. I think that, you know, over the sort of the last decades, death has been medicalised. It's been taken away from families, from communities, whereas, you know, years ago, this was my role as a doula would have been anybody within a community, you know, would be taking on that role. It wouldn't be somebody specially trained particularly, but somebody just who is comfortable working around people who are dying. You know, perhaps years ago, you know, it might have been a matriarch of a community. But this is an opportunity, a real opportunity for us now to reclaim death and bring it back home to communities. And like you say, when people know it's an option to die at home, there is a weight lifted. It's like it's familiar surround. Well, for some anyway. I mean, obviously for some, there's this fear that they won't be. The medical professions won't be there if they need pain relief, but of course that's not the case at all. So some people say, I want to be in hospital because I need, you know, I want to know that everything is there to support me. But spiritual wise, you know, and I'm not talking about religion here, I'm talking about our own inner self, the comfort that we get from being in familiar surroundings in times of crisis, and particularly at the end of life, can bring so much comfort, and it brings that opportunity for neighbours to pop in, for family to pop in, and maybe not so much at the moment because of COVID-19, but there's this relaxation, there's this sort of melting into the fact, okay, I know I'm in familiar surroundings, I know that if I need support, and you know, if they have a loved one there, if they need extra support, they can get on the phone. There is someone that can come and help, or just to advise them on the end of the phone. They might say, I think there might be some pressure sores arising, or some agitation, you know, at the end of life. So it's really, yeah, it's really, in fact, that agitation might be less likely to happen in a familiar surroundings. It doesn't mean it doesn't, because it still does, but it can help relieve some of that fear, because no matter how much we talk about death, when it comes to the act of dying, there are still going to be some elements of fear, because it's the unknown, isn't it? We just don't know what it's going to feel like, where we might be going. Obviously, some religions know where they're going. You know, if people believe in a certain faith, they will, you know, believe that they are going to this certain place. And then there are people who are unsure, and even within people who are religious, they sometimes question that right at the end. What if, you know, because all sorts of scenarios might pop in their heads, you know, because they're at this point of this huge unknown. But it can also be a really beautiful unknown, because they've shed all these layers of, I suppose it's letting things go that seemed important at the time but aren't now. It's a revelation to know suddenly what's important. So this is where the beauty of being able to live fully, because they've understood what's really important, you know, their loved ones, where they are in, you know, if they're at home, that's really important. You know, for some people, that those last hours of dying, they might actually want to be in the lounge, in the garden. There is no rule to say where you cannot die, you know, providing you have support. There is no rule. You know, you know, I have a client whose last wish is, if she can, let's get her into our garden for those final hours. She wants to be among the garden that she's created, the bird song, the wildlife. And how beautiful would that be if we were able to set that up? You know, that would be, you know, so fulfilling for her and for her family, because ultimately, you know, I'm there to support, but not there to get in the way. So the family might be able to attend to that themselves. So I would just be there to yeah, literally just to guide and support that moment, but not to be in, yeah, not to be in the way, not to be, unless they want me completely there, then I'm always in the background, doing my thing in the background, you know. So yeah,
I think that's one of the things with my birth doula. She was able to sort of nod at my husband to remind him of bits, rather than me having to come out of my deep introverted birthing self. If I'd have had to come out and tell him what I needed, because he, as much as I love him and, you know, we're on the same page, he can't read me like my doula could. My doula was able to just like look at me and go, perhaps she might want a drink. And it was the exact thing that I needed. And that's because she spent all of that time with birthing mothers, that she doesn't need words to know what I need.
yeah.
And it's the same with a end of life doula, I guess, that you can say, perhaps, like, this is a time where this person might go quietly. Perhaps this is a time that you want to just hold their hand. Perhaps don't go now. Maybe just have another cup of tea, and just ensure that someone doesn't miss the moment that they've been waiting for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's, in fact, it's in that quiet in that silent space that, you know, that we hold for people as doulas, and I expect that birth doulas, you know, are good at holding that space as well. Notice those very subtle changes that can make us aware that the time is drawing near. And also it's in those quiet moments, those, whether it's a moment of reflection or just holding a really quiet space for somebody to feel whatever it is that they are feeling in that moment. That is what they need. So my approach to it all is, when I come into a situation, and it might be a situation that's quite difficult, there might be some you know, families are complex, aren't they? There might be some conflict with a family about who's going to be there and who, you know, and some rowing in the room. So my job is also, you know, to ensure that my client, my companion, because I really don't like to refer to them as client, you know, I companion them, people through the death and dying experience, so that it's their needs that come first. And if people want to row about something, you know, do you think, you know, we could do this outside? You know, it's never as easy as that. But yeah, in those quiet moments, a lot is revealed. And in those quiet moments, it gives the opportunity, if the person who is dying is still conscious and verbal, for them to express whatever it is they're feeling. So whether that is gratitude or fear, or they might say, I would really like to resolve a conflict that I've had with my brother, my wife, my best friend that we had, you know, from years ago. Or can you share this message with them, because I don't think that I'm going to be able to do that. And in those moments, yeah, a lot is revealed in those quiet moments, and those quiet moments are really important. So I come in and my first thought would be, what would love do here? What would love do here? And, you know, this gives me time and the person time to, I suppose, let the moment open up to however it was. So what we don't want is anything contrived or that wouldn't be authentic to that person. It's such a natural progression, albeit very difficult and very doesn't always go to plan, you know. But if we can just be with what is there, then we can support that person the best way they can. And this isn't just me being there, this is the loved one. You know, if I can guide that loved one on holding that space for the person who's dying.
Oh yeah, because so often the partner wants to do the right thing so much that they don't relax into the moment. They are constantly on edge in this state of anxiety, with worry and a grief, because the person that they're waiting to die hasn't died, but they know they're about to die. It's a very horrible limbo to be in, that you're grieving someone who hasn't died yet, but you know they're going to die, and you've got to be true to your vows, to be in sickness and in health, and you don't want to call on somebody else to be a part of that equation because it's your partner and you want to do that for them, and you can't leave them because, you know, somebody else would be caring for them. And to help someone come to the realization that in nothingness everything is, that is a really tender imparting of knowledge onto them.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, definitely. And I think it's, you know, empowering them really. So if, you know, it, in that scenario, you know, my role might be to do a sort of guided breathing or visualization to help just relax them. And I can also do that with the person dying. If the person dying feels like their breathing is difficult, I can help, you know, with you know, just guiding them with some breathing, just to ease them a little bit, just to help bring some comfort and to just help them to relieve any anxiety, any agitation they might be feeling. But that's a really good point about, you know, the loved one wanting to do as much as they can and not wanting to relinquish that care, because they feel, like you say, it's their duty to do that, and they want to do that. And if I can support them to support their loved one, then that's my job is well done. You know, if yeah, my job is to empower people to be in that space, to care for others. So part of my role as a doula is empowering those loved ones to be able to care to the best of their ability, and for, you know, when they need me to step in and offer some relief, then I'm there to do that. But if I'm doing my job well, they will be doing as much or as little as they wish in that moment with their loved one.
It's really sort of striking me how other cultures and other faiths will have this caring doula type system already inbuilt into the society, into their normal ways of life. This alien, it's alien to human anthropological like existence, the way that we are so separated from our immediate family, that our villages are so tiny, and this is what I'm feeling with the Facebook group Let's Build Our Village for parenting. We don't have our villages like we would have done in our evolving state, in our industrialization, in our ability to create our boxes and have our lives and our careers so far away from our immediate family. We've broken down those bonds and created roles like yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, someone was asking me, you know, where do I see myself in, you know, like 10 or 20 years time? And I don't like that question anyway, because most of the time I have no idea. But I would, and I love, you know, doing this work, but ultimately it would be really great if I wasn't needed, if the role that I am doing now was in everybody's community, within all, you know, close-knit groups. There was people within those groups who are willing to guide those people who are dying in their families and sit with the dying and care for the people, for the families left behind in those first few weeks, to check that they're okay, you know, things, you know, that they're getting the support that they need. So yeah, and I think I don't know at what point death was taken away from us, you know. I can't pinpoint at what stage in our history it was taken away from us. I expect it was when, you know, all the big hospitals were built and medical procedures progressed, you know, and because a doctor's role is to save lives. And it's really actually hard, you know, thinking about that, it's really hard for a doctor to say, we've done all we can. And a lot of doctors hate saying that, you know, and you can understand that it must feel like a failure to them, but it's not, because death.
As doctors and nurses, we are given regular training and updates in communication around the end of life. And the amount of times it has to be reminded to us to not use words like loss. You have to use the word death. And people are like stumbling over the words. The book that I've written for rainbow babies, one of its praise comes from the fact that I use the word, I don't know why they died, and I use the word died and death within the book so that there is no ambiguity,
Yeah.
So that the children don't misunderstand the word and start looking under the sofa for this baby that got lost.
Yeah.
Are you going to lose me too? Like, if I'm out of your sight at the supermarket, are you going to lose me as well? Like, yeah. So I've really sort of made sure that those terms are there to bring it into everyday language. We've had Prince Philip die, so we've been talking about that around the table, and some of the things that my 4-year-old comes out with, because she's got no timeline yet. So it's like, yeah, and his son died 15 years ago. And then yesterday when we went to Malta, it's like, okay, we've got no timeline.
Yeah, but they see it as it is, don't they? They see it as, you know, if you speak to them in an honest and non-ambiguous way, they see it as it is, and they are very matter of fact. Children are actually very resilient when it comes to aspects of death and dying. We don't give them enough credit, and we don't, obviously we have to talk to children at a level that's appropriate for them, but not to, we shouldn't be necessarily softening the blow. It's still going to be a blow however you approach it, but it's important to approach it with children, as you say, with the correct terminology, and not to, I suppose, skirt around the issue. You know, I have a background, you think you already know, in children's hospice. I'm, you know, worked at 3 children's hospices and care teams, and I'm currently supporting Forget Me Not in Huddersfield, just on their bank care team. And it is really important that we don't use the terms loss. We do, you know, death and dying. This is what is happening. Whether we, you know, yes, we might not want to hear it, but this is what's happening. But still, I still hear, even with that environment, people using the words death and dying difficult. So I think there's some, don't necessarily think it's a cultural thing. I think it's something that we hear and read so often, the words sorry for your loss, or I'm trying to think of another one. There's some ones that aren't so subtle, like kick the bucket, you know. People are so afraid of saying the word dead, dying. You know, when I say, you know, I invite people to come and chat once a month to talk about death and dying. And I'm very clear that, you know, these are the words we use, death and dying. And most of the people that come, you know, that are happy to talk about it, are very keen to talk about death and dying, and they are often around people who won't say the words. And it's like, it's this fear. And of course we have to meet people where we're at. So, or where they're at, sorry, not where we're at, where they're at. So for some people, you know, who are very afraid and really don't want to talk about death and dying under any circumstances, that's okay. All we can do is be there for them when they are ready, and and keep having the conversations ourselves with others, so that it normalizes talking about death and dying. It's not this taboo, it's not this morbid discussion that we're having. There's something so fulfilling about talking about it, so empowering, so life affirming actually, about talking about death and dying and our own death, and even the death of our loved ones, because we're thinking if we're talking about it, then we know what it is that they would want towards the end of life. And if we know what they want, that's one thing we don't have to worry about digging deep for when it's needed. So let's talk about it. Let's use the right words and let's talk about it as it is, if we can.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'd like to move on to a book that I hope you've read. I would hope, given your role, I'm going to like drop this on you because it's a #1 best-selling book. Is it Bronwyn's book, The Regrets of the Dying?
I've not read that one.
Oh gosh,
I've got a long list here, a big pile, and that's not.
I was like, oh no,
I get that on my list.
The Regrets of the Dying. I'm sure it's Bronwyn that's written it. We'll have to Google it and put it in there, because I've not read it either. But I've read the headlines, I've read the newspaper articles around it, and that looks like a really good book to read. But I guess I feel like it's all stuff that I know that will be fluffed out with more words around it. And I guess that's why I've not read it yet, because I've spent that time with people. But she's catalogued the top 10 reasons people, top 10 things that people regret. And it's never, I wish I'd worked harder. I wish I'd spent more time at work. I wish I'd, not spent as much time with the children. It's never those things that people regret. I wish I'd gone on more holidays abroad. That one doesn't come up. But I wish I'd taken time out and spent time with my family whilst I was able to. That one comes up.
Yeah, that's it. This is what I was saying about it. Helps you evaluate the most important things, in your life, and those things that do come up, the need, we're all such we live in such a consumerist society, having the latest big TV or, the latest car. At the end of life, none of that matters. What we have, what we possess, none of it matters. But what does matter, and what does come up, like you say, in those regrets or not regrets, is I'm so pleased that I was able to spend more time with my family, or and if it was when regrets do come up, sometimes it's I wish I had forgiven so and so sooner. It's the lack of resolution sometimes at the end of life that people find difficult. They've not forgiven people for something, loved one, a brother, a sister, a parent, a child. They've had a row, they've fallen out, and they've not been able to bring that relationship back together again. And that is one of the biggest regrets that I think I encounter with people. But this is something that I can help support if that person is still alive, and even if they're not, I can help guide people in bringing about resolution with loved ones that they've fallen out with.
I think that I've been taught that forgiveness was about the other person, and I think that's a belief that I held, that you said sorry to somebody else so that they would forgive you. So it's a two-way relationship, but forgiveness is nothing to do with the other person. And it's something that I've developed an understanding of over the last few years, that any grudges and carrying that unforgiveness around with me is my burden.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to do with the other person, because they're off living their life, whether they're doing the same thing again and again and again and not learning from it, or whether, you know, they've seen the error of their ways and are turned and chosen a different path. They're getting on with their life, and yet I'm still carrying a previous truth around as if it's happening today.
Yeah.
And carrying those grudges through time, it serves nobody, only to hurt yourself. And I don't know where I picked up this belief system that forgiveness was, I need to speak to someone to forgive them. I really don't need to speak to someone to forgive them, because it's a selfish act.
Yes. And for some people, you know, you're talking about, you know, it is about ourselves, and for some people the forgiveness is a forgiveness of themselves for putting themselves in a situation that created trauma, perhaps. If you've you know, for some people who have experienced trauma, ultimately the forgiveness, is for themselves, because they feel responsible that they put themselves in that situation when they're not responsible for it. The trauma is obviously caused somewhere along the line. They're not, you know, there's no sort of victim shaming. It's okay, you know, this happened, and I forgive myself for not speaking my truth, for not sharing my boundaries, for not consenting, or for consenting to something I don't really consent to. You know, it's a forgiveness inside, whether that is for yourself or for the other person.
Is it Ho'oponopono?
Yeah.
Just,
Yes.
it's something that I have read about and I have looked into, but whenever I start looking into it, I start getting Facebook ads of a guy with big gold chains around his neck waiting to tell me about Ho'oponopono, and I'm like, I'm not ready to jump into your circle, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. Yeah.
I like the ethos of it. It's just this one guy. I'm like, I'm not ready to be following you, thank you.
Yeah.
But it's an old Hawaiian
It is. Yeah.
saying, and if someone's like, I know someone who did it with a neighbour that was parking their car and making it difficult for them to get out of their drive, and within 2 weeks of starting to say Ho'oponopono, the person's got a new car that fit on their drive. So it was something really simple like that, and he was like, oh, actually I put it into practice.
Yeah. I think, you know, for me, when I practice that, it's helping me to see the situation from the other person's point of view as well. So rather than trying to manifest things change, is helping me to see that there are two sides to this, and it's not just, it might be annoying me for the excuse me, for the car to be there, but that person's car is there because they need to park their car somewhere, and they can't help at that point in time that they've got such a big car, and I have to see beyond the car and see the person for being human.
Yeah, and I think that's what sort of happened. He accepted that the car was there, and then for whatever reason the car was changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like it's probably time to close up. Are you still, like, obviously COVID will have stopped this, but are you still doing cuddle therapy, and was it laughter yoga as well?
Yes, so I still teach laughter yoga. At the moment, that's not in person, it's still all done online. I'm a meditation teacher, and that is currently online, but hopefully mid-May we'll be back in person. That's where my venue is opening up. The cuddle therapy is still online at the moment, but I'm moving towards restarting in person, perhaps within the next few months. I don't know, depends on how things weigh up. But what I sort of say to people who are waiting for me to return to have the cuddle therapy is, it's a delicate balancing act for me, because you know, the very act of cuddling someone is intimate, it's close, isn't it? So I have to weigh up that closeness and my work with people at the end of life, and the impact that might have on them with COVID.
And
so I have
barriers of a plastic apron and a face mask and a pair of gloves.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Yeah.
Actual...
not going to happen in cuddle therapy.
Yeah, it's like, I'm wearing full PPE, but we can cuddle. Like, I'm in a bubble, but I will cuddle you. You might as well be cuddling through the internet, hadn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a matter of me finding my way slowly into what can I put in place to support people in person, but doesn't put anybody else at risk. So yeah.
And as we've been talking, I feel like I have actually attended one of your laughter yoga sessions. I do. I was like, I think it is. Because I went to Leeds vegan fair.
Oh, then yes, that was me.
And I did a laughter yoga session in Leeds Town Hall.
Yes.
And I have to say, it was really brilliant learning that every cell of my body cannot tell the difference between a fake laugh and a real laugh. So if I just spend a bit of time remembering to laugh, then I can cheer myself up.
Yeah, change your body chemistry. Yeah, just through laughter. Yeah.
So yeah, I remembered it. You had an impact. I mean, that's quite a precise part of the class. Yeah. And yeah, it did have an impact on me. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh no, it was good fun. You're welcome.
That's like maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah. It was
destined to meet Nancy.
I know.
Destined to meet.
Long time coming.
Well, thank you very much for your time. So I'm Rachel from Parent Sanctuary, and I've been running these videos on behalf of our Parent Sanctuary parents and Let's Build Our Village, the Facebook group for parents who've been affected by maternity leave, being taken away by COVID. We're looking forward to another session next week on the Baha'i faith, and then we'll be returning to a normal monthly session after that. And I think I've got a mortgage advisor booked in for May and internet safety booked in for June. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and if you've enjoyed the content or want to get in touch with Nancy, then her contact details will be in the comments. She does the End of Life Doula and the cuddle therapy and yoga, laughter and mindfulness. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.